Hello, I'm Jonathan Giggs, and on behalf of Miranet and Rogers TV, welcome to the Councillor Candidates Debate for Ward 11. The purpose of this debate is to give our viewers an opportunity to know better the candidates in their ward and learn where they stand on key issues. We're pleased to be joined today by candidates George Carlson and Imran Hasan. Prior to this recording, the candidates drew numbers to determine the order in which they will be speaking. Each candidate will have the opportunity to make an opening statement, after which time our panel of community members will ask questions pertaining to the issues of the day. The candidate to whom the question is posed will have time to answer, after which the other candidate may comment or rebut. Sitting on our panel today are Richard Landau, political analyst, and Moaz Ahmed from the Western GTA Summit Task Force. At the conclusion of the question period, each candidate will have an opportunity to make a closing statement to you, our audience. With that said, the individual who drew the first number is George Carlson, and I now turn it over to him.
Thanks very much. Hello, everyone. I am George Carlson, the Councillor for Ward 11, and I've had the pleasure of representing you and your family for the last 14 years as Councillor at the Region of Peel and the City of Mississauga. I'm a lifetime local resident of the area and raised my family here, and I live in downtown Streetsville. I serve currently as Chair of the Heritage Committee and on the Environmental Advisory Committee for the City of Mississauga, plus all my normal duties in looking after the issues in the ward. My priorities have always been about the same. I'm trying to maintain Mississauga as a green city, a safe city, and a place that's affordable to live and raise your family. And I think everything that I do flows from that with those basic premises. We have been one of Canada's safest cities for 14 years straight, so it's important to me that we maintain that. I work very hard with the local police, bylaw officers, crime prevention committees, neighborhood watch, etc., to make sure we deal with issues before they become serious, to keep our streets, parks, and schools very safe for the family. So that's extremely important to me. At City Hall, I do look for good value and strategic investments as I invest your money, your tax money, which is hard-earned, into various programs and the capital projects across the city. I look for value over the long term so that you'll get the results you're looking for in a city with an infrastructure that you can be proud of. For instance, recently I pushed for and had council support the introduction of LED lighting throughout the city. You'll notice your street lights have changed. It's for the better. They're dark sky compliant now. They reduce energy use by 50%. We're saving something in the order of $2 million a year. That's year after year after year. That makes money available for other programs or to keep your taxes at an affordable rate. As a committed environmentalist, I've helped reduce the size of our fleet of trucks and machinery at City Hall. We now use smaller buses with biodiesel fuel. We've reduced our energy use by 9% and been recognized for that achievement at the city. Every retrofit of our older buildings and the new ones that we're building are all to LEED Silver standards, which I think is important as we move forward. We just can't afford to be wasting our money on fuel and all the greenhouse gas emissions that come from it. As a volunteer, I work with local volunteers to plant 35,000 trees per year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George Carlson. Now we'll hear from Imran Hasan and his opening statement.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction, Jonathan. Greetings to my fellow residents of Ward 11 and the citizens of Mississauga. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to introduce myself. My name is Imran Hasan, and I am your candidate for Councillor, Ward 11, Mississauga. My family came to Canada in 1973 in search of a better quality of life. Growing up in small towns and large villages in southern Ontario, I have come to gain a greater understanding and respect for the Canadian cultures, values, and traditions. I've also traveled to many communities around the world. This experience has allowed me to learn and respect the different languages, faiths, cultures, and traditions. I believe the diversity of our people is very important and makes us, as Mississauga, a more vibrant community. I'm so proud to call Mississauga home. In 1983, my family chose Mississauga to establish an innovative and sustainable business in the telecom industry. By 1991, my family became fully invested in the community. over the past 23 years, I have overseen the growth of my family business from infancy to maturity, and we continue to create jobs in the community. Today, my wife and I raise our 2 young children right here in the ward. They are currently attending Britannia Public School in the French Immersion program. I believe the only way to get to know your neighbor is to have a conversation. Over the past 3 months, I have reached out to over 7,000 residents in Ward 11 by knocking on your door. People tell me they need a representative who is attentive and responsive. As your councillor, I will continue our conversations to prioritize the issues and concerns and take action. Small business is the backbone of our local economy. I will support entrepreneurial ideas and strategies to help create sustainable jobs in our community. As your Ward 11 councillor, these decisions will only be made with the consultation and consensus of both residents and business owners.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hasan. That's your time for your opening statement. You'll be able to say some more during the question period. And we'll go to our panel of community members, and Moaz Ahmad will ask the first question.
Good afternoon. Mississauga faces low turnout and low engagement in civic affairs. What will you do as councillor over the next 4 years to bring greater awareness to your constituents of what happens at City Hall during council meetings? And more importantly, how will you make the decision-making process more open and more inclusive?
We're going to start that with Imran. We'll answer that first.
Jonathan, thank you for that. Moaz, thank you for the question. It's a very important and a very good question. I think the importance of voters coming out to voice their concerns and issues is really the forefront of my platform. I've gone out over the past several months and connected with people at the door, and I've encouraged them to have their voice heard, because it's so very important to let people know what your issues and concerns are. And as your elected official, I will be listening to these issues and concerns, prioritizing them, and within a budget, taking action to address these matters.
George Carlson.
Well, it seems kind of ironic to me that the better the communication systems we have, the harder it is to reach people, because perhaps some people don't want to be reached, or else they're trying to protect their privacy so much that we do have a difficult time getting through them. So some of the strategies we use are electronic newsletters, printed newsletters, and of late, back to sending a stamped envelope, because people will open them and take a look at what's going on. It's always a challenge, because it seems like a certain number of people make it happen and the rest of the folks go, what happened? So we're always trying to get people out to participate, to fully engage with their community. I'm not entirely certain how we can get more people out to vote, but if we can get them to participate in their community, especially the young people, to get them interested early on through reaching out to through the schools and through sports groups and churches and the like, I think we'll have an excellent opportunity to raise another generation of engaged people. But it is a tough challenge, I must say, to get people to take a strong interest in what's going on in the community.
Our next question will be asked by Richard Landau.
We've been hearing that there's a broad public consensus that we have a serious transportation problem and public transit problem. People talk to us about gridlock, about people driving too fast. You can't get there from here. Tell me what your policies are to help improve this situation.
George Carlson will answer that first.
Thanks very much. You have to take an integrated approach. I think perhaps early on, some of the civic leaders thought there would be one answer, like more GO train or a subway, et cetera. I think we are looking at a multimodal solution to these type of problems, starting from encouraging walking, cycling, skateboarding, through to electric bikes, and so on, to get people to use a variety of methods to get them off of the traditional roads. I'd like to see a greater use of segregated bike pathways, because studies show that if they're separate and segregated, more people will use them by far. These are kind of the local transport issues. As far as getting the province together, I think we've missed perhaps 20 or 30 years of adding to the subway system, improving generally public transit. I live on the GO line. In fact, part of my backyard would probably disappear if they ever went to three tracks. There hasn't been a lot of expansion. The subways haven't expanded very much. I think a certain point, the government of Ontario and the federal government is going to have to just get very active in this business with the help of the municipalities. We're sort of like the poor cousins. We can contribute and we do our best and we'll stand there and we'll hold the door for you, but we need to have some of the money come in to help us with these, mostly they're billion-dollar plus projects. So there won't be a simple solution to it, but if we let another 20 years go by without actually getting to it, it'll be getting pretty close to hopeless.
Thank you, George. Imran?
If I could just ask Richard for you to repeat that question, please.
The question is that there's a wide public perception that we have a transportation problem, crisis, that there's a virtual gridlock. People can't get from one place to another easily. We've also been hearing from people that people drive too fast. And in essence, it's a problem moving people from point A to point B. What will you do about it? What's your policy?
Richard, that's a very important question. And as I have, again, been going door to door, speaking with the residents of Ward 11, Mississauga, I have found that each area of the ward has its own unique and specific challenges and opportunities. And certainly speeding on inner roads is a concern. And I think that one way to address that would be through education and awareness, not necessarily enforcement. I think that we need to do a more effective job to work together as a community. And we don't necessarily need to drain our regional police forces in order to educate and create awareness in our communities about the children and the seniors and the people who just simply want to have a safe and a more secure neighborhood to live, work, and raise their families.
George, did you have anything to add about transportation in the ward?
In terms of enforcement and the local traffic speeding, this is an issue in every neighborhood. The compliance rate, according to authorities on stop signs, for instance, is in about the 20th percentile. So we do have a problem where either we're moving at 0 kilometers an hour, or it seems like people want to move at 100 to make up for that. So there's a lot of issues with enforcement that we need to do. Education is important. We're trying some new methods like line painting on the sides of the road, as well as removable speed bumps. We're doing a pilot project so that we can have a low-cost speed bump arrangement that we can take in and remove in the fall to try to get people to slow down. But I do agree, it seems a shame to have to spend so many tax dollars to get people just to slow down a little in the neighborhood. It's puzzling to me, but it's in every neighborhood, and it certainly is a widespread problem.
Imran?
Just to add to what George has said, I believe that today as a society we're overconnected. And what I mean by that is in technology, we have too many things going on in our lives, whether it's bringing our work home or taking our home to work. And again, going back to creating that balance of life and work in order to create that quality of life is really a priority for me personally and for my family, and I believe for the families of the residents of Ward 11.
Thank you, Imran. The next question will be asked by Moaz.
Imran, what do you see as the biggest challenge facing the residents and businesses in your ward? And what is your plan to address this challenge in the next 4 years?
Moaz, thank you very much. That's a very important question and an excellent question. Again, as I had mentioned earlier, I'm the president of Transglobal Systems of Canada. We're a telecom industry right here in Mississauga. We have been established here since 1983. We've been in Streetsville, Mississauga since 1991. So I have seen myself personally the challenges and the issues of job creation, sustainability. And we have to work more closely with businesses, especially small businesses who are the backbone of our economy, to create mentorship programs for youth throughout the public school system, into high school, and right through into post-secondary. So those are some of the ideas and strategies that we need to bring to the forefront of this conversation.
And George?
Good question. Business goes to where it's welcome, I found in my years of experience. I ran 2 local small businesses in town from starting in about 1978 through to year 2000. So I've seen a lot of changes over a 25-year period. I think one of the most important things we have to do is embrace the new technology, the new way of doing business. If you look at my little village of Streetsville, where I'm from, we've lost the mills and the brickyards, but we're replacing it with things like tourism and inviting people in to see some of the heritage aspects of the town. So we have to be willing to change with the times, which I find sometimes a little difficult. Secondly, as a councillor, I consider a very important part of my job to keep my ear open and listen to people who want to move a new business into the area. I go meet them in their current place of employment, try to get them to see the benefits of moving into the Ward 11 area, Meadowville South, the Streetsville area. And sometimes I'm successful, and I do get some people to locate there. And I think it's important that we make them feel welcome and help them through our business development office too. There are a lot of challenges to opening a new business, red tape and so on. So if we can do anything to make it a welcome transition, because people have a choice. They can go here, they can go to Milton, they could go to Markham for that matter. So I try to make it as user-friendly as possible. But again, they go to where they're welcome, and I think that makes the biggest difference.
Did you have additional thoughts, Imran?
Yeah, I thank you for that opportunity again, Jonathan. I just wanted to add to what George has said about the heritage of Mississauga and the diversity of our people. It's really our greatest strength. As your Ward 11 councillor, I'll preserve the image of the village and the city and foster programs that will improve the quality of life for our youth and our seniors. And going door to door, not only to residents of Ward 11, but also door to door to the businesses in Ward 11, I have learned a great deal. I'm listening and I'm taking notes, and I will be taking action.
Thank you, George.
No, I think that's fair.
Okay, so our next question comes from Richard.
Well, you've just raised a very good question, which I'll put to you first, George, going door to door. What are you hearing from voters this time around? What are you hearing in particular, well, the themes that are coming up? George, we'll start with you.
I think the most exciting theme that I run into at every door is quite simply who's going to be the next mayor of Mississauga and what direction are we going in. So it's an interesting conversation because depending on the area, you'll have a lot of support for one candidate or the other, or for a third candidate perhaps. So that seems to be the biggest buzz in this particular election. Aside from that, the usual array of local challenges you run into, the traffic, and when are we going to get some particular piece of infrastructure repaired, that sort of thing. But the overarching interest in this election by far is a certain amount of excitement, trepidation over who the new mayor is going to be.
Well, thank you.
Imran?
Well, Richard, thank you for that question. I'm glad that you asked it. I'd like to start off by saying that the single most comment I hear when I'm at the doors is that nobody knocks on the doors. And it may seem old-fashioned to you, but again, I believe the only way to get to know your neighbor is to have a conversation. And I will continue going door to door, having those conversations with my residents in Ward 11, with the businesses, as well as homeowners. And I want to let you know that it's very important to me. The feedback I'm getting is we need to be more secure, we need to be more safe, and we need to have an economy that's more vibrant.
Thank you very much then. Off to you, Moaz.
Imran, Mississauga occupies a very important position in the Western GTA. But we also have a challenge in that low taxes often mean low revenues for the city government. What would you do to ensure sustainable funding for transportation and other forms of infrastructure over the next 4 years as councillor?
Well, I don't have a simple answer to that very complicated and sophisticated question. I think it's a valid question, and I appreciate that, Moaz. This is going to require a process by which we go out and speak to the residents, again, of our ward. We hold roundtable meetings and perhaps even online surveys. Use the different technologies and tools that we have to reach out to people and invite them to give their input, because this decision-making process is not about me, it's about the residents of Ward 11, Mississauga.
Thank you, George.
Well, you raise a good point. The Mississauga, depending on whose figures you use, is either the third lowest tax jurisdiction or the sixth lowest of the 27 competing municipalities. So for many years in the early 90s and into the 2000s, we had a 0% tax increase. So that has meant that our tax base is considerably lower than other municipalities. Now, I think if you're going to approach people for new expenditures, perhaps for transit or some other worthy project, you have to treat the taxpayers with respect. You have to show them we're raising $1,000 per home from your neighborhood. Brampton, it might be $1,100. but the difference would provide us with the ability to do this particular transit project and so on, and seek their support for that. And then, this is where government always falls down, actually spend that money on the area that you said you would. Treat the taxpayers with respect. Now, I don't know for sure exactly what direction that might take, but I do know that we are among the lower tax municipalities in Ontario, and it does present a challenge, believe it or not, that, you know, when other people come from Oakville, or I won't name the higher tax municipalities, but they, you know, they always say, well, we have 4 times summer grass cutting, or twice a week pickup, and so on. And we really do run quite a lean operation in Mississauga, but in the way that we have modern communication now, and we can get to voters and taxpayers, if we want to have a summit regarding our spending priorities and what investments we'd like to make, I think that's a great idea. And that's part of the reason I'm looking forward to a new administration in the city, that we can be a voice for some positive change.
Thank you very much, George. Next question will come from Richard.
Well, that leads into my next question, and that is the vision thing. If I was to say to you 20, 30, 50 years from now, what will the community look like? What are some of the sterling features of Mississauga? What will be some of the sterling features of your ward? How do we get there? Because we hear the complaint from a lot of voters. The politicians only think from election to election. But if you were allowed to think 20, 30, 40 years out, what do you think would distinguish the community at large and would distinguish your ward? What does it need? I'll start, I guess, Imran, I'll start with you first.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, Richard, and that's a very a broad and a very deep question. As your Ward 11 councillor, I will bring fresh ideas and new perspectives. And I think the word collaboration and integration come to mind. And it's about how we can work with the different technologies we have, the different levels of government we have, and the different talents of people we have right here in our ward. And it's clear to me that this is going to be a very important question at the ballot box, as far as what is the vision for the candidate for the ward as well as for the city, and it's also very important to know that when you go door to door and you have those conversations, you hear about the ideas and the feedback that you're getting from the residents, which is so very important to incorporate into the vision for the city.
Thank you very much. George?
I think in 20 to 30 years, we're going to see a world of difference in Mississauga, and in fact, across the GTA. We're moving very rapidly away from the standard suburban model where, you know, all the neighbors are lined up flipping the hamburgers at the same moment, coming home in the same 4-door car. Those days are coming to an end. I think you're going to see far less use of the automobile, greater use of public transit, people greeting other forms of transit with a shrug, like this is how I get around town. The downtowns are going to have more people in them, like the villages of Streetsville and Port Credit. They're shy of actual people living in the core, so we need more people in the villages to bring some vibrancy. I think you're going to see a slightly more European model, people on the street, people enjoying each other's companies, an emphasis on health and wellness, and a little less emphasis on individual acquisition and large monster homes and so on. I think the coming energy crunch is going to take care of some of that stuff. I'd like to be around to see it because I think it would be a much more interesting way to live and much more sustainable.
Thank you. Good.
Our next question from Moaz.
George, that takes us right into actually the next question that we have is, despite increased economic prosperity for many areas of Mississauga, many segments of our society, the most vulnerable continue to be at risk. Now, how will you address issues like food insecurity, affordable housing, and access to opportunity for lower income and seniors individuals in your ward?
Excellent. The challenge municipalities face is that we are really in the service industry. We provide fee services for a fee. We're not, as the federal and provincial governments are, progressive in that we don't have access to tax money based on your income. So we have to always be aware and look through a lens of fairness, that all the services that we provide to lower income people are available, accessible, and very affordable. And in that regard, we have some work to do, I think, on some of the costs for transit. For instance, that's one of the key drivers for helping lower income people. We need a higher minimum wage in Ontario. Would be a nice start as well to help people live their lives. Food availability, security is very important. We've got an excellent food bank system but I like to be there on the day that we close down the food banks because we don't need them anymore. We've set up it's sort of a very interesting. I'm very involved with the food bank system in Mississauga. That we have a system that rivals any grocery store chain, but it's the kind of business you like to see closed down. And unfortunately, the food bank operations are subsidizing the low minimum wage, and people are able to get food, which is a good thing, and then use their smaller pay for their accommodation. So we need help from the feds and the province for affordable housing. You just do the math. The city does not have the tax base to build even at $200,000 or $300,000 per unit. We need help from the federal government, some sort of revolving credit, somewhere where we can get access to mortgage money at a low rate as it's paid off, like the old co-op housing model. As the buildings are paid off, that money's rolled into another project, just to keep the ball going. We have something like 15% of Peel residents are in some form of poverty, and I don't think that's acceptable. And I think every decision we make at council should bear in mind the effect it has on the people who have the least ability to pay. And if you start with that every morning, you won't go too far wrong by the end of the day.
Thank you, George. Imran?
Jonathan, thank you for allowing me to add to this conversation. Last year, in 2013, my company celebrated 30 years in business in Mississauga, and we did so by holding a community corporate event in which we raised $5,000 for the Mississauga Food Bank. And that was an event that George attended, and he was witness to the contribution that we've made to this community, and we'll continue doing. But I want to share a personal story with you about an individual who I met at a senior care facility in Streetsville. We're talking about a very fragile and a very vulnerable community here. And as again, I was door knocking, talking to people, I connected with this lady who shared with me a personal story of her challenge of being able to get groceries and the fact that she did not have access to public transit on a given day in order to be able to do that shopping. So I think it's very important that we consider our seniors, our fragile and vulnerable community, and we should really think very closely and listen very closely to what they're telling us and put programs in place and facilities in place, either move grocery stores closer to where they live or provide a transit system to allow them to get to the grocery stores they need to go to.
Thank you, Imran. And now, Richard, your question?
What is the single biggest challenge facing your ward in the years ahead? What is the single biggest challenge? Start with you, George.
A little difficult to name the single biggest challenge. I think you've hit the nail on the head earlier with the transit system. I think is the interconnections between the various parts of the city. I think that's key because I'm seeing the individual automobile becoming a diminished commodity as time goes by. So really I would put a lot of emphasis on transit and then on the sustainability piece as well. If we can't afford to keep our services at a high level, what would we do then? Mississaugans are used to a very high standard of service, so the ability to pay keeps me awake at night because if we can't afford the nice services everybody likes, what kind of a city would that make? And I don't want to be anywhere near the helm if we start to slide on our standards for properties and for public infrastructure maintenance. So those are the things I worry about, in that we are the guys that have to send out a tax bill. So if people, if they start to say we can't afford to live here, that's not a good sign. So far, so good, but those are the kind of things that I worry about the most.
Good, thank you.
Imran?
Richard, that's an excellent question. And again, going back to my conversations with the residents of Ward 11 at the doors over the past 3 months, the message is very clear to me. And what I'm hearing is that we need to build a community. And the only way we can get to know our neighbors is by having a conversation. And what I've heard as I go door to door is that our neighbors don't know each other. You might know the person immediately to your left or to your right or maybe even across the street, but you really don't know the people down the street. And again, I'm going to emphasize that we can build a safer, more secure, and more vibrant community if we just get to know each other. and that would require less dependency on law enforcement and medical services if we just have people who are in our community who can share those resources, look after each other, and get to know one another. So to me, that would be the greatest challenge.
Thank you very much. Now, Moez, your question.
Yes, Imran, my sister lives in Hamilton. Hamilton has a population of about 550,000 people. They also have 4 hospitals. And Mississauga, with a population approaching 800,000, only has the 2 hospitals. Do you feel that we're adequately served with hospitals and medical care in Mississauga? And secondly, what investments would you make in healthcare and healthy lifestyle as a councillor?
Moaz, thank you for that question. It's interesting you mentioned the city of Hamilton. I also grew up in the sister city of Oshawa, and so I can definitely understand the demographics of the people and of the communities. To answer the question about the amount of hospitals that we have to service the people, in Oshawa we only had 1. And if in Hamilton you have several, I believe it's also because you have the universities that use that as training facilities. And Mississauga here, I think we're blessed to say we have 2 very effective hospitals, that being Trillium and that being Credit Valley. And from what I understand, and from my own experience of having 2 children born in that hospital, Credit Valley Hospital, as well as my father, who was rushed there to the hospital several years ago when he had a heart attack, we received excellent service. So my hats go off to the professionals at the hospital, our EMS, and our emergency services people. So, from my personal experience, I'd have to say that we have an excellent infrastructure, excellent services, and unless I'm hearing otherwise, I think that we're on the right track.
Thank you, George.
Well, we're in the realm of provincial funding for hospitals and so on, and I can't say I'm an expert in this field at all, but I can tell you that both of our hospitals have doubled and then doubled again in size. So in terms of numbers of bed per 100,000 residents, I'm not sure if we're above or below the provincial standard. I don't get very many complaints about not being able to get into the hospital, but I do hear a lot of requests about having sort of more regional health facilities. And again, we talked about using new technology and new way of service delivery. The old hospital model, I mean, I'm sure that's probably a 5,000-year-old model. People are looking for small community centers where they can come in, maybe some minor service can be done, and then quickly home again without tying up an entire hospital bed. So I think I hear more about those sort of services for sick children overnight, that sort of stuff, than I do about adding another hospital. And quite frankly, we probably end up with one, because hospitals are managed regionally, they're not city facilities. The next hospital will no doubt be sort of in the Halton area that will serve the northwest Mississauga, because province has wisely wiped away the barriers between municipalities so that we can send patients all over southern Ontario. But I think it's an important area for us to talk about, and we have a great healthcare system. A lot of compliments I receive in the course of a year. Even though you don't perhaps read in the newspaper, I do get calls from people saying, just to let you know, such and such hospital did a great job. So I pass that along while we're talking about it.
Thank you, George. The next question will come from Richard.
George, I'll start with you. What, in your opinion, is a reasonable response time to a constituent when they contact you with a concern?
Well, I can tell. Well, I hope they think it's reasonable. If not, I might be in trouble on election day. I get about between 100 to 150 contacts a day in my office
now. That many a day?
Per day, yeah, during a business day. Some of them are 1 second. We'll be there. We won't be there. We'll send the guy over to fix the light. Mm-hmm. Generally, I try to have my desk cleared off by sundown, at least with a response back speaking. I try to get back to people within a 24-hour period, at least get the initial file open.
Okay.
Richard, that's a very sensitive question. And I can tell you that based, again, on my door-to-door experience of connecting with the residents of Ward 11. I've made it my personal commitment in my business to offer a 48-hour response time. And I think that's reasonable given the technology and the number of calls and the number of people that we're connecting with. So I'm not sure about being able to get that cleared off my desk by sundown. I don't think that that's reasonable. I'd like to undercommit and overdeliver. And I think a 48-hour turnaround time is acceptable. And again, as I'm going door to door, talking to the residents of Ward 11, they believe that commitment is acceptable. So I would be able to put my name on that commitment.
Thank you, Imran. Moaz, what's your question?
My next question for George. Does Mississauga offer youth adequate social, educational, and work opportunities? And how will you contribute over the next 4 years to providing greater opportunities to young people to develop as leaders?
If we're talking about the city of Mississauga employment opportunities or opportunity within Mississauga, the city? Because they're two different, I can answer both if you like. I think the city of Mississauga needs to expand its hiring practices to be more inclusive to the wider community. I do have some concerns raised with me that it's very hard to be hired at the city, and it may be a little bit of an internal thing. So I consider that an important issue moving forward, that we need to make sure that we have as wide a possible base of hires at the city to include all the communities to the best of our ability. So that's always been my thought when I was on the school board. We did exactly the same thing. So in that regard, now if you're talking about the wider community, I'm thinking that the best way that we can have it is to have a great economy, to make sure that we, for instance, in the Streetsville area with a redevelopment of our town square, $3 million investment into a neighborhood that could use an investment, and most of the jobs will be service industry, so at least we have some entry-level jobs being created in a small little microeconomy. So as I go about my daily duty, I always think about, will this contribute to the hiring of some young people? Will this get some people going? That critical first job is the tough one. I have two grown sons myself, both one university educated, one college, and they both have a hard time getting a half-decent job. And that's a phenomenon of our modern time. And I guess it's a pay grade or two above me to know what's going on in the world economy, that we can, when somebody as well educated as the kids I see, have such a struggle to get that first half-decent job. So I keep that in the front of my mind daily. Actually, it's a subject of great conversation at City Hall, that what can we do the best that we can with our 5,000 employees to offer opportunities to the young people of our city.
Thank you, George. Imran?
Thank you, Jonathan. This is it's something that I talked about in my introduction, and that was creating mentorship programs for youth. And I think it's very important to start in the elementary grades as well as high school and right through to post-secondary. It's too late by the time you graduate to look for a job. Most often that those opportunities have already been taken. So coming from a business background, again, I would be the ambassador for businesses and the advocate for the residents of Ward 11 and help create programs that would allow young people to be mentored by leaders in the business community. And that, again, is a very detailed and a very complicated process that we don't have the time today to talk about, but given the opportunity to be your Ward 11 councillor, I will certainly take action.
Thank you very much, Imran. Next question, Richard?
Imran, I'll ask you this for you. What can your ward do, what can Mississauga do to distinguish itself in the GTA? When I drive from community to community to community, I don't see much identity. I see one broad swath of development. I don't see an identity. What can Mississauga do to distinguish itself?
Well, Richard, that's again a very important question. And over the last 23 years, I have traveled coast to coast in this great country of ours, and I've always been the unofficial ambassador for Mississauga. I've always talked about the greatness of the people, the diversity here, and the one thing that always seems to be a topic of my conversations, which is a personal favorite of mine, is the food. So when you talk about diversity, you talk about the people coming from all over the world to this great city. I think that clearly we are distinguished, and we are distinctive, and we're unique in the people that we have, the restaurants, and the food.
Unfortunately,
George, that leads to a great question that I would like to ask.
T-shirt that says, "Change is good, you go first." And after everybody has a bit of a laugh, I say, if you really want to look and I won't name them, but go to any city in Ontario that's suffered in the last 20 years and take a look what 30 or 40-year-old infrastructure looks like with no change. People say, oh, just leave it alone, but they don't really mean that. What they want is for you to keep the great stuff and get rid of the things that need to change. We need to evolve. Can't sit still. Honest to goodness, I've been to cities and towns where nothing's going on. Boy, it looks like it. So I think if we're sensitive to our heritage, which I think we are, hopefully, and we create new, interesting future heritage buildings, we have an opportunity to bring people along. Now, you got to work with folks. That doesn't come easy for some people. And you show them what it could look like, and there's always opposition, and there's always what if, and so on. But that's the part of the leadership of the job, is that you have to introduce today's people to tomorrow's world. That's part of being a city councillor or any kind of a civic leader at all. And in fact, it's the part of the job that is the most rewarding, because nothing I like better than being told, I'm never voting for you again if you build this, and then on the opening day they go, my goodness, this is really beautiful. I'm like, well, I'll do a little bit like that. So it's kind of that's the fun part of the job.
Thank you, George. Imran?
Thank you, Jonathan. Very good question, and just to elaborate on what George was saying about heritage. I think it's very important to preserve the heritage of Mississauga, and there are villages like Streetsville that have a lot of historic buildings that can be refurbished and preserved to keep that look and feel of that village in the city, and that's so very important. What we don't need is 5,000 square foot homes coming up in a small community of 700 square foot bungalows. And I think that these are the things that we need to do to respect and understand our voters, our taxpayers, and the residents of Ward 11, Mississauga.
Thank you very much. Who's up next?
I guess
Richard, yes.
If I was making it possible for businesses that are non-polluting, that allow their workers to telecommute, and may actually be beneficial to a community, what kind of inducements should Mississauga be offering, if any, to bring those kinds of businesses in? I'll start with you, Imran, first.
Thank you, Richard, for that question. You've caught me off guard, to be honest. It's an unusual question. It's not one I was prepared for. In fact, many of the questions that were asked for today weren't something that really we could prepare for. But I think many of the questions are common sense questions, and I think this is one of those. That it's very important to think about the economy, but equally to balance it out with the environment, and to be able to make decisions that are visionary. Something that we need to understand what the impacts will be, not just 1 year or 5 years from now, but 20 and 30 and 50 years from now. And again, I'm running as your councillor for Ward 11 Mississauga because I don't need a job. I'm doing this because I want to create a better quality of life for the next generation of our leaders, and that being your children and my children.
Thank you, George.
Well, we're fortunate in Mississauga that we don't have a long history of post-industrial sites. That our locations that need tender loving care aren't as many as, say, for instance, in the city of Hamilton, where the things were left behind. So I think it's a great opportunity when you're working with the brownfield sites to come up with innovative restoration of the property, which we can trade a little bit of density or more coverage on the property in exchange for the fact that there's a greater investment made in order to clean the site up. It doesn't help the city to have brownfield sites that are paying virtually no tax, because nobody really wants to lease them or operate a business, and it's a blight on the city when you have areas that need redevelopment like that. So that's when the feds and the province and the city get together and put their thinking hats on. A think tank, some sort of this question that comes up quite often. Really think some of the best politicians I've known have been long-serving ones, and some of the ones that are just elected for a term or two, not so much. But I think you have to measure the enthusiasm.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. And I was looking forward to that question. In fact, I have been having these conversations with residents of Ward 11 as I've been door knocking. And it's clear to me that the questions come up several times, and people ask me if it's good enough for the United States of America to have a two-term limit for not only like that here, or is there something we don't know about the benefits of that two-term limit. I personally am doing this for the next generation of I'm doing this personally for the next generation leaders of this community. It is on us as elected officials to be able to pass that baton and do what's in the greater good for the community.
Life for seniors that they'll want to stay and can afford to.
Something to do during the day that's a low-cost activity. And basically, I don't believe in that. I think it's have it fully integrated in the community. But walkability is an important thing, and a certain rustic charm, I think, that people are looking for. They don't want to be at the, on the edge.
Especially our vulnerable community of seniors. It's clear to me, and door knocking and having those conversations with people, that we don't have those services that are accessible. We don't have grocery stores that are walkable, and we need to work more diligently and focus.
Mississauga as a city is 40 years.
It is confusing to residents when they say, well, wait a minute, you got to call the region for that, but the city for this. Fire is local. I've never figured out why would fire be local and police regional. They flip a coin. I'm not Ottawa and Hamilton. Phase out the two-tier local government. I think most people think we're over-governed as it is, and But having said that, it may very well be some years off, and it's not the kind of thing that the Ontario government seems all that interested in getting into right now. But certainly the function, the hard work.
I certainly believe that we need to integrate, and we need to simplify. In fact, when I go door to door and I'm having these conversations with the residents of Ward 11, they're often confused and in many cases just ignorant to what it is a councillor does. And I think that it's important that we have these conversations with our residents, and the only way to get to know your neighbor is to have that conversation and inform them, educate them, and bring that awareness of what is it the elected official is responsible for? What are the different levels of government? It's clear to me in this conversation that there's some confusion between regional and city. And most certainly, I think that our services and our great people in fire and police, waste management, and city workers are doing a great job. We just need to find ways that we can collaborate and build that synergy and simplify the system.
So, do we have time for one quick question? Do you have a short one there?
Well, I'd like to follow up to that question.
Okay.
How long do you think it's going to take before we actually can streamline? I'll ask you, George, were your colleagues on council, is this a common sentiment that there's too much government, or is it just you?
Well, no, there's a motion on the record where the city of Mississauga requested that single-tier system be established in Peel, and the result of that was 2 new councillors were added in Mississauga. So be careful what you ask for. You might get the wrong answer. But I think when we look back on it, was currently MP Brad Butt, who was the chair of it, the task force that looked at how to deliver service, and that perhaps the Region of Peel could become more of a service board that delivered those hardcore services like police and disability and so forth, and conservation authority, and just appoint a couple councillors to those boards and get rid of the political level of the region. So it didn't go very far, but I thought it was a great idea.
Thank you very much. Well, we're going to end things there, and we're going to go to the closing statements. And Imran, you're going to speak, so the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. I believe the only way to get to know your neighbor is to have a conversation. And over the past 3 months, I have reached out to over 7,000 residents in Ward 11 by knocking on your door. People tell me that they need a representative who is responsive and attentive. As your councillor, I will continue our conversations and prioritize the issues and concerns and take action. Mississauga is ready for new leadership with fresh ideas and new perspectives. Together, we will continue to build a safer, more secure and vibrant future for our next generations. On October 27, 2014, I'm asking for your vote. Imran Hasan, Councillor, Ward 11, Mississauga. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Imran Hasan. And now to George Carlson for his closing statement.
Well, thanks to Rogers for providing the opportunity for us to speak today and to reach out to the voters for the October 27th election. For me, I guess this is election number 5 for councillor, and nothing has changed for me in terms of my commitment to respond quickly to issues, to deal with problems before they get out of hand, and to try to use my common sense to deliver services to you that you can enjoy and afford. We're going to get a lot of change in this next term. There'll be at least 3 new councillors and 1 new mayor and a new chair at the Region of Peel. So we're looking at a considerable amount of change. change is good and it's constant, and there's nothing to be afraid of. But along with change, we're going to have the opportunity to build this into just an absolutely first-rate.
For complete.